Ja, da er vi klar for neste sesjon. Da har vi klart å få opp en whiteboard her. Det har vært interessant å bivåne, kan jeg tenke meg. Det er ikke en del av acten til John Forhouse, men han skal snakke om humor. Så vi skal altså si velkommen til John Forhouse med denne sesjonen av titlen How to be funny when you're not. Og jeg skal bare gi en liten introduksjon til John Forhouse før vi starter. I will just give a short introduction in Norwegian to the audience, John. John Forhouse er fra Los Angeles og er en internasjonal kreativitetsrådgiver som har lært opp manusforfattere i 29 land på 5 kontinenter. Og han har også nylig vært konsulent for Thomas Giertsens Helt Perfekt og holdt masterclass for Norsk Filminstitutt og i NRK. Han har gitt meg en introduksjon som skal være John Forhouse by the numbers. Og da har han sagt at han har skrevet 19 bøker, inkludert 7 romaner, og av de var 6 veldig gode ifølge han selv. Og hans velkjente lærebok i komedieskrivning, The Comic Toolbox, How to be funny when you're not, er tilgjengelig på 4 språk, eller 5 hvis du regner med den russiske piratkopien, som han sier. Og han har skapt 4 TV-show og skrevet en klassisk amerikansk TV-serie, Married with Children, som er blitt adaptert i 2 andre land. Og så har jeg fått opplyst at han har 1 hund, 2 barnebarn, 624 Facebook-venner og 515 personer som følger han på Twitter. Og så har han minst 17 interessante ting å si om hvordan manusskriving kan gjøres lettere, morsommere, og ikke minst hvordan man kan ha det mer moro selv med arbeidet. Ladies and gentlemen, a man of many numbers and even more words, John Forhouse.
Thank you. Thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? My name's John Forhouse. That rhymes with, well, never mind. It's easy to remember. I had a dream one night. I dream I'm doing stand-up comedy. I get up on stage and I say, ladies and gentlemen, my name is John Forhouse. That rhymes with whorehouse. It's been that way all my life, and I'm sick of it. This is in a dream, mind you. I'm changing my name, I say to the audience in my dream. My new name, Vordello. I woke up from that dream and I had a couple of thoughts, and one was, can we turn down the stuff that makes me hear me too loud? Whatever that technical term for that is. Thank you. I had 2 thoughts, and one was, wow, that's a pretty good joke, but how come I never saw it before? And why did nobody in my family ever see it? How had we overlooked such an obvious joke for generations? Why, in other words, why is my subconscious having all the fun? And this led me to an exploration of, if you will, the technology of comedy, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some ways of looking at how to be funny using very simple problem-solving strategies. And when these 45 minutes are done, I hope that you'll come away from this experience with a couple of things. One is with some tools you can really use to be funny anytime you want. And the other is with a certain sense of lightness of spirit, so that you're willing to take a chance, you're willing to take a risk, you're willing to make a joke and not worry so much about whether the joke works or not. Now, we only have 45 minutes, so I'm going to cut through the preamble, although I will be around at lunch and afterwards. So anybody who has individual questions, or you're like very excited about Married with Children, come and see me afterwards, and I'll be happy to talk about that. But for now, here's everything you need to know about comedy in 3 words, and that might surprise you. Comedy is cruelty. Comedy is cruelty. That doesn't seem to make much sense, does it? Seems like comedy and cruelty are opposite to one another. But if you think about funny moments, if you think about what makes you laugh, you're going to discover that what makes you laugh is someone is suffering. Am I right? Take a Mr. Bean, for example. What's a common Mr. Bean situation? The guy is trying to achieve a goal, and his own inabilities are keeping him from achieving his goal. Everybody with me so far? So comedy is cruelty, but a thing is not funny to the person it's happening to, which I didn't write down because it's too many words. So I'll say it again. A thing is not funny to the person it's happening to. It's funny to the people watching us. So if you want to be funny, you have to make a kind of a mental adjustment and then a tactical adjustment. The mental adjustment is you got to be willing to be cruel. You have to be willing to hurt imaginary people. It's useful to remember that these are imaginary people and not real people. You can do things to real people in the real world that will get you into trouble and make them very unhappy. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when you're making up jokes, when you're creating comic situations, the people whose peace you're attacking, the people who you're making suffer, they don't exist, so it's okay. Now, in the world of my experience, I work all over the world with writers, and I find that writers, as a group, avoid conflict. We don't like to have conflict. If we did, we wouldn't be writers. We'd be selling cars or something like that. So this is a hurdle we have to overcome. We have to get used to creating conflict, to making situations bad for our characters. It requires a trick of the mind, and the trick of the mind comes from remembering it's not happening in the real world, it's happening in this fake world of your imagining. All right, so that's the trick of the mind. Now here comes the strategy, and it's really very simple. If you want to create comedy, all you have to do is make a bad situation worse. In other words, attack peace. Attack a character's peace. Make the character suffer. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you some strategies for doing that. But I want to make sure that we're all on the same page so far. Let's take an example. Let's imagine that I'm standing on a stage in front of a large group of people. Can everyone imagine that with me? I know it's a stretch. Okay. What is my peace? What would make me happy in this moment? Oh, stop. How can I experience ego death if everyone keeps telling me how wonderful I am? Yes, exactly right. If I get through to you and you respond positively, I feel good, right? So now, if you want to make me suffer, what could you do? Class dismissed. You've already got it solved. You understand this intuitively, and this is one of the points I want to make. You already know everything you need to know about how to be funny. You might not have the willingness to risk, and you might not have some of the technology, some of the rules and tools that I'm so fond of, but you already understand the structure. Here's a guy who wants something, and if you want to make the situation funny, just take that thing away from him, or make it harder for him to get it. And we're going to look at some specific ways to do that, but right now you understand it. You're making a bad situation worse, you're attacking the character's peace. All right, now, we have a target, myself, and we have a goal, make him suffer. And by the way, don't worry about making me suffer. I've been down this road many times before. I like to tell people, I work in Hollywood. I've been abused far worse than you can ever manage. How can we make him suffer? Well, we can use tools, and I'm going to show you some of these tools right now. Here's a comic tool called Clash of Context. And if you're writing stuff down, this is a good thing to write down so you remember what it is. Clash of context. In the real world, there's a very narrow range of things that belong in any situation. And outside that narrow range of things that belong, there's an almost infinite array of things that don't belong. To create comedy in any situation, then, all you have to do is think about what belongs in this room, what belongs in this circumstance, what doesn't belong, and how can I bring in things that don't belong to attack the character's peace? So we can think about this room here, and we can look around and we see there are some things that obviously belong. Chairs, tables, whiteboard, guy in the back with a microphone, camera operator, hi mom. All the normal stuff. Outside of this room, tons of things don't belong. For example, what doesn't belong in this room? And I'm going to ask you to shout your answers because I lost my hearing along with my virginity, my sanity, and my memory at a Grateful Dead concert in the Boston Garden in 1979. An elephant. Is that what you said? An elephant. I always have to be careful because I've reached a point where my waxing imagination and my waning hearing intersect. And plus you guys speak with an accent that's known to you and unknown to me. So I'll hear elephant and maybe it'll come to me as telephone and I'm like, how is that funny? Okay, I'll try to go with it. Yes, an elephant. Why is an elephant funny? Simply because it doesn't belong. Now, that's a good solution, but it's not a great solution because it doesn't sufficiently attack the character's peace. What can we bring in here that would be an absolute torment to this guy? Your ex. My ex, thank you. Why? Because the stakes are so much higher, right? Because I have an emotional relationship with my ex, and we'll get to that in a second. That's a good one. So my ex doesn't belong here. God knows. Let's dwell on this. Who else doesn't belong? Not what, but who? My dead grandfather, The police? Santa Claus. Thank you very much. Suppose Santa Claus came in the room and I was the only one who saw him. That would attack my peace. Okay, now we come to something called the rule of 9. The rule of 9 says, for every 10 jokes you try, 9 won't work. For every 10 jokes you try, 9 won't work. And if you think about it, your first thought is, well, that's a pretty high failure rate. That kind of sucks, right? It doesn't. Here's why. If you try one joke, how much of your ego do you have to invest in that one joke? Do the math. 100%. All of your ego goes into that one joke. But if you have 10 jokes, how much of your ego do you invest in any one joke? That's right, 10%. So you can afford to fail without losing your entire ego structure. And this is a big deal. This is not trivial. In order to be funny, you have to be willing to risk. And in order to be willing to risk, you have to be willing to fail. Around here we have a saying, if you must fail, fail big. That's one of the most liberating ideas I know. Someone who's willing to fail big can try things that won't work and then keep trying other things that won't work and eventually get to something that does work. So if we were trying to crack this clash of context puzzle, what can we bring into the room in a physical sense? It doesn't belong here. We would generate a list, and we would find that some of the solutions to our list are okay, you know, an elephant, Santa Claus, whatnot, but that ex-wife, that has extra value because there's an emotional connection to it. Or maybe we'll just go through the list until somebody says something that makes everybody laugh. Game over, we win. How do you know if it's funny? They laugh. That's how you know. But you might not be willing to risk, and I have to dwell on this for a second because it's the key to everything. Imagine the following moment. I'm at a cocktail party, and I think of a joke. I do this all the time, especially at cocktail parties. I don't know why. And it's here in my head, and now I'm going to voice it. It's like coming out of my mouth. But as it's coming out of my mouth, I hear a little voice in the back of my head. And tell me if you don't have the voice in the back of your head, too. I call mine my ferocious editor. And my ferocious editor says, hang on, John. Don't tell that joke. Think before you speak. Because if you tell that joke, it might not be funny. And if it's not funny, they might not laugh. And if they don't laugh, they might not like you. And if they don't like you, you must experience full ego death and pass away. I've put 100% of my ego, my entire sense of well-being, on a joke I haven't even told yet. Does that seem reasonable? But it's very common, is it not? This is how we edit ourselves all the time. If you want to be more effective, not just writing comedy, but in all of your creative endeavors, you got to think about how you edit yourself. I'm not saying kill your ferocious editor. That's a great idea, but that takes time and practice. At this point, I would just say, be aware that you edit. Think about how you deny yourself the freedom to fail and give yourself the freedom to fail by installing this little idea. I'm not just going to fail, I'm going to fail big. And you're going to find out that it's really hard to come up with genuinely bad ideas. Eventually, some of those bad ideas turn into good ones. It's natural. Okay, so we've talked about a rule, clash of context. A tool, clash of context. We've talked about this thing, rule of 9. Now let's look at some other tools we can use. And like I said, it's kind of a good idea to write this stuff down, although there are resources available to you from me. Tee-hee. Here's one called, doesn't even start with that letter. Here's one called inappropriate response. Clash of context tells us that in the physical world, there are a few things that belong and a whole lot of things that don't belong. Inappropriate response tells us in the world of human behavior, the same thing is true. There's a very narrow range of responses or behaviors that are appropriate to a situation, and an almost infinite array of responses and behaviors that don't belong. To use the tool of inappropriate response, all you need to do is take attitudes out of the places where they do belong and put them into places where they don't belong. And since you just did such a good job with my ex, I'm going to come back to you and ask you, what attitude can we give to my ex-wife that's inappropriate to a classroom situation that will attack my peace? I'm sorry? Bitter. You know her. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I know they're recording this, and eventually my wife is going to watch this, and she's going to say, what ex-wife? No, honey, it was for demonstration purposes. All right. Well, now I'm sweating. This moment's getting worse and worse. And I'm just rolling with it. Okay, so my ex-wife is bitter. What other attitudes can we give to an ex-wife that would make this guy suffer? Okay, what else? Pregnant. Oh, I'm pregnant. That's a good one. The pregnancy reveal is completely inappropriate to this situation. That's a great example. Someone who comes in and her attitude is, whatever else happens, I have to reveal to that guy that I'm pregnant. That's inappropriate to the situation. It will create tension in the situation. Yeah? Because she wants something and I want something else, and that's the heart and soul of conflict. I want something, but you want something else. Now, you might be thinking at this point, this doesn't sound particularly funny. I mean, it's got a kind of a structure that I can see, but where are the laughs? The laughs come from the rule of 9, where you just roll out these 8 or 9 different inappropriate responses and wait for the one that makes you laugh. What you can do now that you couldn't do before is trust your structure. You know the math of the moment. Take a guy, figure out what he wants, figure out how to keep him from getting what he wants, and throw forces of opposition in his path. Let's take another example. We're on a tram. And you're a young lady sitting on a tram reading a novel on your way to work. What do you want? Peace. You want peace and quiet. All right, now let's use clash of context. What physical thing can we bring onto the tram that will make this bad situation worse? Sorry? A screaming baby. Screaming baby. What else? And then what can we bring on in terms of inappropriate response? Aggression. What else? Seduction. Somebody who treats a tram as if it were a nightclub. Now, let's dwell on that for a second. If you have somebody who treats a tram as a nightclub, you've got 2 things going on. One is clash of context, because the physical environment has been transformed in this guy's mind, from a tram to a nightclub, and also inappropriate response, because he's taking all of his nightclub moves and putting them into the tram where they don't belong. Everybody understand this? All right, let's add another comic tool, and this comic tool is exaggeration. Because I heard somebody say screaming baby, and I said, 1 screaming baby is not nearly enough. How many screaming babies can fit in a tram car? Let's find out. Because I guarantee that if we get enough screaming babies in there, that moment's going to get very funny. At this point, I would like to point out to you that the difference between real reality and comic reality is often a matter of exaggeration. In real reality, there's an appropriate number of things, an appropriate size of things, and an appropriate importance of things. In comic reality, that appropriate value is stretched. It's either made much larger or much smaller. And in the making of it much larger or much smaller, that's how a comic moment is created. And you can do this not just with the number of things, like screaming babies. You can also do it with a person's attitude. Somebody who comes in and says, well, let's go back to my bitter ex-wife. If she's just in the back of the room going like this, well, she's bitter, but she's not a problem. But if she's in the back of the room screaming or reading off a list of my faults, which are not in short supply, I might add, the exaggeration of her attitude will create the comedy in the situation. Everybody understand this? Can I get you to nod your heads? This is my power. It's like I can make people nod their heads. It's a powerful force that can only be used for good or for evil. I hope at this point, even just a few minutes into this presentation, that you're already starting to feel a little bit more relaxed about how you can go about approaching this comedy business. That you need not rely on the gift of being funny. I think I have a gift for being funny. I talk funny a lot. But it's mostly just a whimsy and a willingness to try things. And then, having discovered this quality within myself, I went back and looked at it and analyzed it. And that's really where hope for all of us lies. Because the structure of this stuff is so simple and so useful. All you really need to know is that there's a thing called an inappropriate response, and stick that into situations. And sooner or later, you're going to find something that's funny to the situation. This is useful in meetings. This is useful in your work. It's useful in your personal life. It's useful on the tram. It's useful everywhere. Because it gives you a certain sense of personal freedom. And that personal freedom is, I'm not going to say that it will redound to your happiness per se, but let me give you an example. In my longer workshops, I do the following exercise. In my 2-day workshops, at the end of the first day, I say to my students, between now and tomorrow morning, go out and do something you've never done before. It doesn't matter what the thing is. Part of the exercise is to see what they come up with. And classically, in Rome one time, a young kid, 21-year-old guy, came in and I said, well, what did you do and how did it feel? And he said, well, I read a hardcore porno magazine on the bus as if it were a newspaper. Why is that funny? For a couple of reasons. One we haven't gotten to yet, we will in a second, and that is taboo. But it's also funny because it's clearly inappropriate response and clash of context, right? Just like wildly inappropriate response. So I asked him, well, how did it feel? And he said, well, at first I was really frightened. I'm doing something that I know is wrong and bad, and it's making me nervous. He said, but then I noticed people were giving me a lot of space. And I started to feel powerful. Because by doing this thing that broke their rules, that attacked their peace, I actually got a lot more freedom for myself and a lot more power for myself. And he said, by the time I got off that bus, I was just high. And that's really what I want you to take away from this. If you use these simple technologies, these simple tools for being funny, you're going to start getting positive responses. You're going to get great results right away. And when you do, it will get you so freaking high, you won't believe it. And I could do a whole song and dance about how that chemical rewards in the brain is good for human survival. We can talk about that at lunch. It's not important now. But I want you to have that reward. I want you to feel at ease with your comic creativity. And the way I get you there is by demonstrating that it's not magic, it's simple problem solving. So let's look at this tool here, taboo. What's this all about? Comedy begins where tolerance ends. You reach the point where people start to feel nervous, where people start to feel uptight. They will store tension in their bodies. And they'll store that tension to the point where it begs for release, and the way it gets released is in the form of a laugh. So, what's taboo in Norwegian culture? Almost every goddamn thing. Is that what you're thinking? I can read minds. I got to see the thought balloon over your head. What? Talking to each other on the subway is taboo. So the mere act of talking to someone on the subway breaks the taboo, makes them feel uncomfortable, and empowers you. What else? I think I have a picture of that. My first Bluetooth experience, by the way, was right here in Norway. I was working here in 1999, and I'm walking through the park behind the palace, and a guy's walking along talking to himself. And it's the first time I'd ever seen it, because he turned and I saw he's got a Bluetooth on. I thought he was just a nut. Nowadays, that's so commonplace, we don't give it a second thought. But at the time, it was very strange to me. So yes, so talking out loud about your sex life on the subway, on the phone, inappropriate and taboo. What else? Abortion. Sex with children, probably. Usually it is. I did this workshop in Germany once, and I was trying to demonstrate that there's no moment so horrible, no moment so taboo that you can't get a joke out of it if you try. Because the idea was, well, sometimes you can just go too far. And I said, I don't think you can. I think there's always a way. And they challenged me on it, and I said, okay, well, how about this situation? We're in the offices of a television network executive, and he's in there with the head of a very successful sketch comedy show, and they're looking at a video. And on the video, we see a grown man and a young girl in bed together. Clearly, they've just had sex because they're smoking cigarettes. And the network executive is going crazy. He's pointing at the screen. He says, you can't put that on television. It's awful. It's terrible. Look at the message it sends to people about smoking. And that is a common comic tool called defeat of expectation. Right there in that joke, you had an expectation. The expectation was that I was going to say something about sexual relations between adults and children. I set you up for that. You stored the tension, and when I got to the defeat of expectation, when I said smoking instead, you released that tension in the form of a laugh. That's the way this thing works. Set up, stored tension, create expectation, defeat expectation. And by the way, if that joke had bombed, as sometimes they do, Somebody asked me this last night. You're an expert on comedy. What do you do if you get up on stage and you tell a joke that doesn't work and people don't laugh? I say, well, I sweat a little, but then I try to teach from it. Because the fact is, not all jokes work for all people, and this is very important to remember. Suppose you'd already heard that joke I just mentioned. Would you laugh at it? You might give me a polite laugh, but honestly, if you'd already heard the joke before, there would be no tension, and therefore no possible release of tension based on a defeat of expectation, because your expectation would not be defeated. Or, on the other hand, I'll give you an example. What do you get when you cross an agnostic with a Jehovah's Witness? Somebody who rings your doorbell for no apparent reason. Now, what pieces of information do you need in order to enjoy that joke? You got to know that Jehovah's Witnesses have a certain reputation for knocking on doors, and you have to know that agnostics are not religious people. Was it something I said? So we can think of our audience as existing on a bell curve. Some people won't get the joke because they don't have enough information. They've never met an agnostic, they don't know the first thing about Jehovah's Witnesses, or they don't have enough acceptance. They might themselves be agnostics or Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, they're not going to laugh at that joke. Some people won't laugh at the joke because they have too much information. They've already heard it, or it's just been done to death in their mind. So we know we're going to lose the left end of the curve and the right end of the curve all the time. This is our audience right here, the BFM, or big fat middle. That's what we're going for. That's our target all the time. And this is why it's okay to fail. Because you will necessarily fail with some of your audience all the time. Who's a stand-up comic here? Do we have any stand-up comics in the crowd? Sit-down comics? Fantasy stand-up comics? All right. I can't do anything with that. Am I the only one hearing that? Because just sounds like some cats are fighting outside. You tell a joke and the joke doesn't work. Sometimes the audience has heard it before, sometimes they're just not into it, sometimes they just don't get it. Material is appropriate to situations. What is appropriate for a late night sketch comedy show is not appropriate for an 8 p.m. sitcom. Who's involved in situation comedy here? So just, what are the rest of you doing here? Seriously, journalists, people who are just scarpering off work, just taking the day, hoping to kill the day. I'm not sure that I can be of much practical use to journalists in terms of, hey, how to make your story about that crime or fire more funny. The best I can do is help you with your office environment to try and add a little bit of whimsy to it. All right, so we were talking about taboo, clash of context, inappropriate response. This taboo here, this is a sliding line. This changes from group to group and from culture to culture and even from gender to gender. Jokes that are appropriate to a group of men only or a group of women only are not appropriate to mixed groups, yes? So the whole idea of taboo shifts depending on who you're talking to. I'm told that in a few minutes a bell will ring. I don't want that to freak anybody out. Just apparently there's a school here somewhere. All right, so is everybody with me on this so far? Remember, the idea is to attack a character's piece, to make a bad situation worse. So let's think about how these tools can work together. Create a new situation. Let's say we're at a funeral. What's an appropriate behavior for a funeral? That's an inappropriate behavior. I start by asking what's appropriate. What's appropriate to a funeral? Very limited list of things. Silence, solemnness, speaking well of the dead, low tone of voice, appropriate clothes, crying. So 5 or 6 things that are appropriate to a funeral. What behaviors, what attitudes are inappropriate to a funeral? Everything else, literally everything else. You don't need to worry about running out of ideas. You have literally everything else to choose from. And that's laughing, that's talking too loud. Help me out here, what else? Yep, what else? Reading the newspaper or reading porn. Thank you. Thank you, me, for making that point. Reading the newspaper is an inappropriate response. Reading porn is taboo. These two tools are now working together. You can have a comic moment that is both an inappropriate response and taboo. And then, if you turn it from reading a porn to carrying a love doll, then you have also exaggeration. And if you have a half a dozen of them, and they're there to mourn the dead, then you have clash of context. It should be apparent to you, I hope it is, that these tools all work together. It doesn't have to be one thing or another. They can all work together. It can be exaggeration plus taboo plus clash of context. And if you're stuck, and this is the beauty of the whole thing, if you're stuck, you no longer have to ask yourself what's funny in the situation. All you have to do is ask yourself what's inappropriate or what's taboo and draw up a short list of things that don't belong. And off that list, guaranteed something's going to pop. And you're going to look at that and you're going to say, son of a gun, that is funny. Not because you set out to be funny. All you did was set out to solve a creative problem. And this is the heart and soul of my, I hesitate to use the word technology because every time I do, I feel like a Scientologist. But see, there's an example of a joke that didn't really work. Because you don't know what I know about Scientologists and their relationship to the word technology. Anyway, where was I? Can we roll the tape back so I can find my spot again? It's a peacock. It sounds like a peacock. I'm not kidding. Kill if necessary. Inappropriate response. Or just shut the doors. That's the coward's way out, I might say. Thank you. You can't script this stuff. You cannot make this stuff up. Which is the beauty of it. Look, all I'm doing, I'm living in the same reality you're living in. All I'm doing is apprehending it with a bit more whimsy. Do you know this word, whimsy? I don't know what it would be in Norwegian. Can somebody tell me? Sounds like the same thing. All I'm doing is living in reality with whimsy, because I find that what I fear about people disapproving me does not come to pass, and what I gain in terms of people enjoying my company profoundly comes to pass. And all because I'm willing to take chances, take risks, try things that might or might not work. And all because I understand that the whole thing has a very beautiful underlying structure that I can go back to over and over again. Eastern philosophy describes creativity as carrying buckets to the river. The idea is that there's magic out there. I'm sure you've had this experience. You're walking along the street and you get struck by a great idea. Anybody had this experience? It's the magic of creativity. I love it, but I can't count on it. Because I can't always be walking down the street waiting to get struck by a good idea. I'm sitting at my desk. I'm on a deadline. I've got to be funny or creative now. I have to put these words on a page. Where do I turn? I find that it's not useful to ask the question, what's funny? Or what's a good idea? I need a better question than that. I need a question like, what doesn't belong in this situation? Or what would be taboo here? Or how can I take what I have and exaggerate it? Because I find if I'm asking and answering simple questions like this, I'm getting information I can use. Broadly speaking, in creative problem solving, this is not just about comedy, this is about everything. If you're trying to solve a problem and you can't, stop trying to solve it. Instead, break it down into smaller problems and keep breaking it down until you find a problem you actually can solve. Set out to write a best-selling novel, that's a problem you can't solve. I'd like to write a best-selling novel. Well, who wouldn't? But I don't know what genre, I don't know the story, I don't know the heroes, I don't know the tone, I don't know what language I'm writing in. Until I know these things, I cannot proceed effectively. So I take the big question, what's a best-selling novel, and break it down into successively smaller questions until I can find one I can solve. Okay, we're going to take a quick, brief look at creating comic characters. So much better with a whiteboard. Comic characters have, at their heart, something called a comic perspective. The comic perspective is a way of looking at the world that normal people don't share. It's a filter of reality, if you will. And if you think about all the comic characters you know and really, really love, you're going to figure out pretty quickly that they have a single, strong viewpoint, a way of looking at the world that's clear to you. Great example, who's a fan of Big Bang Theory? Are we watching Big Bang Theory these days? What's Sheldon's comic perspective? Everything is science. And not only that, but I am the master of it. I am the master of everything. I'm smarter than you. His comic perspective is, I'm smarter than you. What's Kramer's comic perspective on Seinfeld? No, better yet, who's the Married with Children fan here? Did somebody say? Okay, me. I'm willing to admit it. I've made Married with Children in Russia and Bulgaria. And I've seen it in other countries, and it's always very, very popular everywhere in the world. Everybody says the same thing. That Al Bundy, he's just like us. Especially in Eastern Europe, they say that. But what's his comic perspective, Al Bundy? I'll answer for you. I'm suffering. Everything that happens to him is filtered through this perspective of suffering. Guy's reading porn on a bus, what's his comic perspective? The rules don't apply to me. How does a nervous person cross the street? My comic perspective is nervous. I'm adding exaggeration to make it comic, so I'm really, really, really nervous. How do I cross the street? I don't. In fact, I can never cross the street. I'm too afraid. How does an arrogant person cross the street? Exactly. Doesn't wait for the light, doesn't wait for traffic, just crosses. This is my street. I'm in charge of it. You see how very different those points of view are, right? So once you know the character's comic perspective, you know two things: how they'll be funny and what they'll do. That's pretty much everything you need, right? So here's a provocative question for you. What is your comic perspective? And a way to think about this is just to ask yourself, at the moments when I'm funny, why am I funny? Because I have a quirky way of looking at things, or because I say what other people are thinking, or because I say the opposite of what other people are thinking, or I'm sarcastic, something like that. If you take that quality and just exaggerate it, you will turn yourself into a comic character. And if you want to be just funnier observationally, just think about how you're funny, turn up the heat a little bit. What's your comic perspective, lady in the pink kerchief? Yeah? No idea. Anybody? Yes? Naive. How does a naive person cross the street? Hope for the best. All right. So you have a comic perspective called naive. Now, to make this character come to life, we're going to have to do two things. We're going to have to add flaws and humanity. Flaws doesn't necessarily mean bad things, just things that create a sense of distance between the individual and the audience. Because it's a tricky thing about audiences. They want to feel comfortable to laugh. And this is true of readers, television viewers, people in a stand-up nightclub situation, anybody, anywhere. They have to have a safe emotional distance. So we give our comic characters flaws, separation, things that create a sense of distance between the audience and the character, so the audience will feel safe to laugh. Because remember, a thing isn't funny to the person it's happening to. It's funny to the people watching. And in order for you not to identify too strongly with the character, I have to give the character some flaws. What sort of flaws might we expect from someone who is naive? Gullible, thank you. Uneducated. Simple, and by simple I mean simple in dress. What else? How does this person look? Say again, please. Blue eyes, thank you. And that has a kind of a extra quality to it, because blue eyes, happy, thank you. I'm actually going to put that over there because it's a positive quality. But I could put too happy here. And it's worth noting. Kind, too kind. Because that means she can be taken advantage of. So we give her a bunch of negative qualities to create a sense of distance. And we think about these qualities and we realize some of them are in harmony with the comic perspective, some are in conflict with the comic perspective. That doesn't matter. This is a creative building exercise. We're just trying to put a character on her feet. It doesn't matter whether these qualities stay with her for the long haul or not. We just want to first look at what she looks like. And again, this is so much easier than saying, okay, guys, we need a comic character. Does anybody have any ideas? Instead, we say, let's start with a question we can answer. What's her comic perspective? And that can be anything. What are her flaws? And those can be anything. What are her positive qualities? Why do we need her to have positive qualities? We have given the audience a reason to feel safe enough to laugh. Now we have to give the audience to feel close enough to care. So we endow the character with positive qualities, qualities that inspire sympathy and empathy. Sympathy, I like this gal. Empathy, I am like this gal. And if it sounds to you like we're creating tension within the viewer or within the reader, internal conflict, we absolutely are. Because on one hand, we're asking you, the viewer, mock this person for her flaws. On the other hand, we're asking, love this person for her humanity. And in that sense, we're asking you to feel two different things at the same time. And if you think about comic stories or even any story that you really love, you as a viewer will feel that tension within yourself. You love that tension. And the whole point of the story is to build that tension and then eventually resolve it. Okay, so why do we like her? What are her positive qualities? We already know she's happy. What else? Emotional. I'm going to say loyal. Loving. Say again, please. Sorry? Spontaneous, thank you. And now you have to stop. And uncomplicated. All right. Almost from out of nowhere, we have created, okay, Ted. Almost from out of nothing, in fact, literally out of thin air, we have created a character who is strong, stable, and capable of further development. We've started a story. All we have to do now, unfortunately, time will not allow us to, but we could very easily give this character a name, stick her in the middle of a situation comedy, create a bunch of characters that go around her, and in about a half an hour, have a good, stable, working idea for a sitcom. And it's amazing to think about because people suffer over this stuff. We suffer over our creativity much more than we have to. I was just talking about this on the way in. As a writer, I'm much more efficient now than I was when I was young because I don't spend 5 minutes suffering for every 1 minute I write. Who's ever had a big writing project like at school or something and you just couldn't get over it because you're suffering so much? You're doubting, you're second-guessing? Boy, if I could just get you to, yes, you know that feeling, and if I could just get you to take away from this experience, break it down to problem solving and suffer less, I would feel like I'm doing you a service. And I wish I had more time because I know I can make that case. I know I can make you see such things as it's okay to write it wrong. This is something people don't normally appreciate. You can write something that nobody ever sees just for the sake of getting a sense for yourself of the thing that you really want to write. I introduce you to a concept called platform thinking, which says every level of development is just a level on which we stand, a platform upon which we stand to reach the next level of development. If you're writing a rough draft of anything at all, it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be logical or economical or clear. It just has to be sufficiently sturdy that you can stand on it and reach the next level. And I write television scripts and film scripts and jokes and novels all this same way. Folks, it's already 12:15. I'm not done yet. Don't you get up. Don't you get up. Oh, no, that's okay. You can grab the microphone. Because we're going to do a little question and answer. I know that there's a lot of stuff on your mind that you'd like to talk about. And even though my time is done, I'm going to spend another 10 or 15 minutes here with you, and then we'll all sneak off to lunch together. If you don't want to wait, you don't have to. But I'm going to take some questions now, and as is my practice and tradition, I reserve the right to take the first question psychically. Yes, thank you. That's an excellent question. I do have books for sale. A limited supply, just what I could manage to carry in my suitcase, and you can come up and see me after on that, tell you how ridiculously expensive they are, and you'll say, ha, for Norway, that's not expensive at all. At least that's my hope. But notice how I set up that joke. For me as a guy, you know, my text is, I'm delivering this lecture to you, but my subtext is, I'd also like to sell some books, but how does that make me feel? Nervous, self-conscious. I don't want to be the dick up on stage who says, buy my books, right? So I find a way to tell you the truth in the form of a joke. And that's really what this all amounts to at the end, is the jokes are just a way of telling the truth to make the truth a little easier for people to swallow. Questions? Yes? Can I elaborate on the rule of 9? Yes, the rule of 9 says for every 10 jokes you try, 9 won't work. So the way you do it is you say, I'm going to call this woman Elaine. Elaine is on the bus. What 10 things can we put on a bus that will make a naive person unhappy? And then I'm like, dog, sex maniac, husband, ex-husband. And as you can see, now I'm just free associating from one to the other. I created the ex-husband, and I don't even know what that is. In the time it takes me to draw up this list, less than a minute, I'll have now a rich vocabulary of ideas that I can draw upon. Once that's done, I go back and I look at it, okay, I'm going to explore the husband or the ex-husband because I think that's the most fruitful idea I have here, or that's the one that made me laugh the most. The rule of 9 is just a trick of the mind to give yourself the freedom to generate a lot of solutions to the same problem. People tend to think they need one and only one solution, and that's not practical. The first solution is unlikely to be the best solution. Did that work for you? Okay, what else?
Do you ever start with a message and then write the joke, or do you always start with the joke?
Do I ever start with the message and then write the joke, or do I only start with the joke? Kind of neither. I start with the story and the situation. I find that's mostly where I'm at. I'm examining a situation and then asking myself, now that I understand what the situation is about, how can I make the situation more funny? Although I will say that in my latter days as a writer, I'm very much message-driven. I think it's a good thing to be. I think you want to tell people what you think, but don't get me started on that. That's a whole late-night bar discussion about the writer's responsibility to the rest of the universe. By the way, if you're interested in following me on Twitter, my Twitter feed is called True Fact, Bar Fact. It proposes that there's 2 classes of reality, things that are true and things that sound true in bars late at night. And you just made me think of that by saying bar. What else? Yes? I'm sorry? The episode I sold was Al teaches Kelly to drive and loses his driver's license. And that was an object lesson because that was one sentence. And they said, yeah, okay, great, we'll buy that. And then I tried to tell them the story, and they said, we don't care about the story. We'll work out the story. That comes later. I want to know if that's a money idea. In fact, let me put that phrase on the board. There is in this world such a thing as a money idea, which is to say an idea you just know when you hear it, that's a good idea. That's definitely going to work. And so, presumably, when they heard that line, they said, oh, that's a money idea. We know we can develop that story. Yes?
Did you make people laugh when you were 6 years?
Did I make people laugh when I was 6 years old? If you go to my website, johnvorhaus.com, you will see a clip of me at 6 as a kid guest on a magic show. And you'll look at it and you'll say, man, that guy has not changed. He's got hair, had hair then. But yeah, I'm very much who I was. But I want to pull back on that for a second because that makes it sound like I always had something and I still have it and you don't have it, or people who weren't funny when they were 6 years old don't have it. And I don't think that's the issue. If you're not as funny as you want to be, it's not because you don't have the creative gifts. It's that you don't have the willingness to risk. And I think that what I've had all along is the willingness to try a joke and not worry too much about whether it works or not. Possibly it's an obsession because I just think in funny ways and I can't keep my mouth shut. But I resist that notion. There's no difference between the guy who's giving the lecture on writing comedy and anybody who's listening to that lecture. If there is a difference, again, it's only in that this guy has figured out there's no such thing as failure. That's the big takeaway from this. Yes.
Because I wonder, everybody around me was very funny when I grew up.
Uh-huh.
And I was the one who I was always crying. When I was 6 years, I cried when I went to past the funeral, and I cried for everybody like that. So I was thinking I could be funny.
Well, but you can be funny. She said she was the one who always cried at funerals and whatnot. She was always the one who was emotional. If you just take emotional and put the word over in front of it, turn emotional into over-emotional, you're as funny as you need to be. Simple. That's just exaggeration. What else? Okay, then let me wrap up for y'all. Our time together is so short. I have barely scratched the surface of what there is to talk about here. I have resources available, some on my website, some you can find your way to. I also have a very strict open door policy. Anytime you ever have a question about this stuff, just reach out to me via the internet and I'll be happy to help you. I always say that I will do anything in my power to help you with anything you need, so long as it doesn't take more than 5 minutes and I don't have to leave my desk. As it turns out, I can accomplish quite a lot in 5 minutes at my desk. And it also happens that in this modern world, we're never very far apart. We've been talking about comedy. Underneath the comedy, there has been a certain texture of, let's call it spirituality. I want to raise that to the surface. I'd just like to leave you, as I leave all of my groups, with the following thought, which I live by and feels very important. This, I believe, above all other things, a man shall find goodness if goodness he brings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And I'm sure that you will have more than 564 followers on Twitter after this one. Yeah. And here's a little gift for you.
Thank you.
It's a little boat going up the coast of Norway, so we'll see all the beautiful nature. Some of these people know that one.
Thank you.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.